Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum family, tumefika mahali moja, mashallah. Tunaweza ona ile piramidi ya kwanza, ya pili yenye tumekuwa leo, na ile ya Njori Ncheke, na bado kuna ile ingine yenye iko pale yenye ukiongea pande moja inaweko the other side. Allahu akbar, Allahu akbar.
Unatoka Mpete unakuja Mitunguu market.
Naam. Kila siku ya market na wanaleta mpaka mifugo yao. Perfect pyramids. Perfect pyramids.
Na huyo mwenye anaishi
chains of hills.
Kuna kasenta sasa, si ni pale kituo. Unajua kituo? Kwa hiyo la
Subhanallah. Is it like Allah's name? Allah ulam. Allah ulam. Tunaenda kwa Bismillah. Mwali ya ukweli, mwali ya Jomo hapo. La ilaha illallah.
Ifungua.
Alishafungua?
Established that in the ancient Cushitic religion, the mountain was very important, and on top of the mountain was an entity that would be worshipped through human sacrifice. So the image of the mountain occurs everywhere that ancient Cushitic civilization occurred on earth. Now, the mountain in ancient Cushitic times is called a Meru, and anywhere that civilization touched, a mountain is called a Meru. Therefore, when you look at the idea of a pyramid, the pyramid is really an artificial mountain that was built by the people upon which they would worship those entities which would come down on earth and settle upon the mountains. So you'll find many pyramids where the ancient Cushitic religion happened. Now, in ancient Kemet, the word for pyramid is called Meru. The word pyramid is a Greek word. The original word is Meru. Now, when you go a little bit south to the ancient kingdom of Kush, actually it's called Nubia by the people themselves, but it's more commonly known as Kush. At any rate, they also built pyramids, and their capital city is also called Meru, which is spelled Meroe, but it's Meru. Now, you come back to Kenya, you'll discover that the tallest mountains in Africa are between Kenya and Tanzania. And all these mountains are associated and interconnected by the word Meru. For example, the Mount Kenya has a group of people who live on its slopes that are called the Meru. This is not a coincidence. You go a little bit Further south, you'll encounter a mountain called Mount Meru. And then there's another mountain in Tanzania called Mount Kilimanjaro. And on the slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro is a group of people who are also called the Meru. So you keep on finding that the term Meru is associated with high mountains and pyramids upon which entities would come down and get worshipped by people in exchange for knowledge. Now, what is interesting is that the original name for Mount Kenya is Mount Kirinyaga. Kirinyaga simply means it has nyaga. And nyaga, the etymological root of that word is naga, which is serpent. Now, many people who speak the native language of Mount Kenya will argue that nyaga refers to the ostrich, but it only refers to the ostrich to the extent to which an ostrich feather was the sign of kingship. So that even when you look at the pharaonic crowns and many crowns in pre-colonial Africa, many of the kings would wear an ostrich feather on top of their head to signify rulership or kingship. Therefore, you get the idea of a feather and still the idea of a serpent in the same name, Nyaga. And this is not surprising because if you go to Mesoamerica, one of the gods of the Mesoamericans is called Quetzalcoatl, which means plumed serpent. It's a serpent that has feathers. The same concept that you're getting from the Nyaga, from the Kirinyaga, from the Mwene Nyaga that is supposed to be residing on top of Mount Kenya. Same concept having the same root. Now, you go further north, you go all the way to ancient Sumeria, and you'll find that obviously the people they call themselves the Meru. The Sumeru is actually the Meru. That's the original name. Sumerian is the Greek rendition of the word Sumeru. So the people, the original population of Mesopotamia, of Ur, of Chaldea, of Kish, where Abraham comes from, they call themselves the Meru. But locally, they also refer themselves to the Sangiga, which means the black people. Now, let's move from Sumeria and go to India. Now, in India, it will not surprise any person who is familiar with Hinduism that the term Meru is extremely prominent. Why? Because all the mountains are called Meru. In fact, even in Buddhism, the celestial mountain of Buddhism is called Mount Meru. And in fact, the highest peak in the Himalayas is called Meru Peak. And according to Hinduism, even when you study the Vedas and you study the Tamil religion, you'll discover that the word Meru is also very prominent. For example, they will tell you that Sumeru is the North Pole, Kumeru is the South Pole, and they have all these strings of mountains that are called Mahameru, Pameru, etc. Now, when you look at the mountain range that spans from Afghanistan going into Pakistan and India, there's a very long mountain range. Today is called the Pamir mountain range. But the reality is that the word Pamir is a contraction of the original word Pameru, because every mountain is called Meru. Why? Because entities would come down and settle on top of those mountains, and people would go up to get knowledge after sacrificing something to those entities. And in fact, the territory that is called Kashmir, that Pakistan and India are always fighting about, the original word for Kashmir is Kush Meru, because India was part of the Kushite civilization. In fact, the original word for India obviously is called the Hindu Kush, because there were Kushites, majority of the population was Kushites before the Aryans invaded. So that when you consider what Herodotus say in 500 BC, he identifies the Indians. He says that when he went to India, he could not find any difference between Indians and quote-unquote Africans. They looked exactly the same except for hair texture. Now, jumping back to the ancient Hebrew religion, Abraham was told to go up a mountain called Meru, but it is rendered by the Europeans in their version of the Bible as Mount Moriah. But really the original name and the root of that name is Meru, because on top of mountains that were identified as Meru, entities would come down. So if you see a mountain being called Meru, understand that in ancient times, in remote antiquity, there was an entity that actually resided on top of that mountain that people would go up and sacrifice to, and in exchange they would get knowledge or whatever help they needed. When you take a
Inshallah bado unapata hizi lands hizi zetu za huku Meru ni very interesting. Juu ukisikia kama hapa Wadaraka nasema Kivuka yuko hapa. Ukikuja kama huku kwetu nilienda kuvisit Njori Ncheke Shrine yenye kwa under protection bado ya the Daraka community. Na huko nikaenda nikapata the Stars of David, huko kuna pyramids, yani subhanallah, yani we live in the lands of the prophets. Alhamdulillah.